So imagine waking up, sitting down at your computer, and finding out that over 100 of your favorite Warcraft characters are suddenly available to 3D print. Officially from Blizzard. Yeah. So that's exactly what happened to me with the recent drop of over 100 STL files directly from Blizzard for their mobile Warcraft Rumble game. And yeah, they are. They're totally free to download. So whether you're a diehard Warcraft fan, a painter looking for your next miniature, or totally new to 3D printing and the miniature painting hobby, I got you covered.
Okay, so to get these files for yourself, you want to go over to warcraftrumble.blizzard.com. I'll leave a link down below in the description. And you want to scroll down the page until you get to the bottom part here where you'll see these different factions listed out, and most importantly, that button called View Hero Blueprints. They call blueprints basically what the STL file is. So they call it a blueprint here in Blizzard land. On this page, all the available models are broken into their factions across tabs across the top, and you can just scroll through on each of these factions here, and you can see there's where all the 100+ models are. It's just crazy. Each one of these little thumbnails, you just click on that, and that will download the STL file. I resisted the urge to print every one of these because that would take forever for me, and I chose 4. I chose the Ogre Mage, and I chose the Dryad, the S.A.F.E pilot, which I just actually love gnomes and their flying machines, and I also chose the Banshee. I picked these models for different sizes, different levels of complexity, and just to see overall how these models turned out. The files, when you download them, you have 2 versions. You have an unsupported STL, and they also give you a pre-supported STL. I printed all 4 of these using the pre-supported files to see how well they placed their supports, and we'll get into the results of that just a little bit later here in the video.
So if you're also interested in printing and painting any of these characters, I'd love to know which would be the first one you would choose. Go ahead and please just drop that down in the comments and let us all see. And also on the way down, if you feel oh so generous to help the channel, there's a like button and even a subscribe if you're interested in the content that I make here. All right, with all that said, let's get over to the painting desk and dive right in.
Here are the 4 models that I printed. They've been printed, supports removed, cleaned, and cured. If you are interested in this and don't have a 3D printer, there are some other options. You can always ask a friend that has one if they would be so kind to print you some of these figures for you. Or I know some public libraries have 3D printers and they can offer assistance to do that, as well as makers, maybe some local maker spaces. And if none of those options work for you, there's always online print services as well. So you just Google 3D printing services, you'll find a bunch of those you can choose from. So for the quality of the supports, I think they did an excellent job. They weren't over-supported. All the pieces and parts printed excellent. The little fingers on the Banshee and the little more of delicate parts of the Banshee here as well. They all printed well. I'm very happy with the pre-supports, and I would recommend using the pre-support files over the non-supported to save yourself some time. All right, moving on to the bases. Let's talk about the bases here for a moment. They are, well, they're about 50 millimeters wide, so I'm going to say that the scale of these models is somewhere around maybe a 54 millimeter scale on a guess. And on the underside, each base is individual to the model it belongs to. So in this case, the Ogre Mage, and it's got the Blizzard logo and Rumble logo and all that. But the thing with these bases is they're thick. They're solid resin through and through. They're not hollowed out. And I just wish they were designed more like a Warhammer base, where it's more of a concave on the underside, rather than to have this ton of resin being used for the base. The other issue I have is their tolerances. So as you see here, I'm trying to fit the Ogre's foot to the base, and it's too tight. They didn't, the peg is just too big for the hole. The same issue persisted across all 4 of the models that I printed. So just if you print these, be prepared. You're going to have to do some additional sanding and filing to get the pegs in the holes the proper tolerance for allowing a good fit. Overall quality of the models I think is great. I think the level of detail is great, and definitely still worth printing and painting in my opinion. There's a couple points I want to touch on is regarding cleanup if you're new to the 3D printed resin figures. Is make sure you take proper safety precautions. Wear gloves when you're working with the resin. wear a face mask, some kind of a respirator, have well-ventilated area. You don't want to breathe in the resin dust, and you don't want it on your skin. And you don't need many tools. Here I'm using primarily sandpaper or a sanding sponge and a hobby knife. I do use a file in a couple spots to get the base and the figure to fit together, but you don't need many tools at all just to get the cleanup. So what I'm doing is going around making sure I'm removing all the last little bit of supports and where all the marks that the supports left on the figure. I worked on increasing the size of the hole in the bottom of his foot, as well as reducing the peg size to eventually getting the ogre and the base to fit properly together. With the model cleaned up and fitted properly to the base, now the fun stuff can begin of the priming and painting of the model. As I go into here, I'm going to be showing different paints that I chose, different brands of paints and colors. It doesn't matter what you choose, just choose the colors that you like and the paint that you already have. I'm starting with a Vallejo black primer and an airbrush. You could easily just use a rattle can primer as well to do this, or even paint the primer on if you don't have an airbrush or rattle can. But here I'm just going ahead and putting paint primer on the bottom of the bases first, and then I'll just flip them over after it's dry and prime the top as well. Personally, I always use a black colored primer, but there's white primers, there's gray primers, etc. I personally choose black because it goes into the deepest recesses, where if I don't get other color in there, it's in the shadows, so it just helps my painting process. But feel free to use whatever color matches your preferred style. Once the primer is dry, I take a white paint, it's pretty thin in my airbrush, and I apply this from the top down, and this is called a zenithal highlight. It's where you're really accentuating where the light source is going to be. So if your light source is generally from the top, you shoot from the top down. And this really helps you see where your shadow areas are versus your lightest parts of the model. When painting part of a model that I know is going to have multiple shades of the same color, for example on this ogre, his skin, I'll start with the darkest color that I'll be using in that range of the color. So in this case, I'm choosing this dark slate blue, and I'm going in around the entire model on his skin and giving it a nice thin coat. Thin coats allow the details of the model to show, and also allows that zenithal highlighting that we previously put on to work through the thin coat of the paint. Now I'll move up to what I call the mid-tone. This is the middle color. I'm going to be using a total of 3 different colors for the skin. I'll use that low, medium, and a highlight color. So this is our mid-tone. Now I'm starting to recognize, again, my light source, so top down, and I'm going to apply this mostly from the top down, and maybe bringing it down to like a 45-degree angle to the model from the light source. Again, applying a thin coat's the key here. And I know I'm doing all this with an airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, that's absolutely fine. You can do the same technique with a hand brush. It's just you won't have quite the smooth transitions between the colors unless you spent a lot of time with blending, but you can absolutely do this with a regular paintbrush. Don't feel that you have to have an airbrush to do this. With the mid-tone color applied and now dry, I'll move on to what my highlight color is going to be. And here I'm just choosing a Citadel paint. Again, whatever paint you have, whatever colors you choose is absolutely fine. And now I'm really adhering to that top down. I really want this color to only be where the brightest of the light source would be hitting the model. So top of his head, top of his shoulders, his face, and just the upper exposed portions of his skin, top of his feet, for example, etc. So the final result you're after here is really that contrast. You see from the underside he's really dark yet, but from the top he's very light. So you're just after that contrast of tones within the color that you put on. With the airbrush portion done, I'll move on to hand painting the rest of the ogre character. And I've chosen 2 different browns. I have a lighter brown and a darker brown. I have it on my palette so you can see the colors that I'm using. And I'm taking the dark brown into the shadowed areas of his loincloth and on the bottom edges. Again, it's always that, remember where their light source is coming from, top down, and also you can kind of use the sculpture of the model itself to find where the ridges are and where the recessed areas are. Will also help guide where the dark areas should be versus the lighter areas. So after I finish putting in the dark, now I just transition over to the lighter brown and paint the areas that are facing upwards, the lighter part of the loincloth. And you can always use reference photos. I know there's a bunch of reference photos right from that page we downloaded the files from to look at to see how this looks on the model. And just go slow, take your time. If you hit the wrong color with a brush, it's fine. You just go back and get the other color and just touch it up again. You can go back and forth as many times as you need and get it as clean as you can. I'm going to go ahead and use these same 2 browns for his bracers on his arm, on both of his arms, and I'll put the darker on the underside, and here I'm just putting the lighter right up against it and just doing a real kind of a rough blend here to have that transition between dark and light. The great thing about the Blizzard art style in general is it's this kind of this blocky art style where you don't need the smoothest transitions to make the effect look great. Moving over to this deck tan color, and this is kind of just an off-white color that I use. And this is what I'm going to be using for his teeth. Again, just take your time, go slow. And a lot of times with little small details like this, I'll actually almost just touch the brush to the area I'm painting rather than try to do a full brush stroke. And I'm going to also use the same deck tan color for the white part of his eyes, all 3 of them. Switching back to that dark slate blue I used for the darkest tone of his skin and applying that to his fingernails and toenails. And from this point forward, just really going to work on the last of the details of the model. Using a pallid witch flesh, this is more of like a cold white and just a little touch of grayish to it. It's definitely on the cool side rather than the warm side of white. Using this for his hair, his beard, and his top knot of hair on the other head. I'm using the same brown as we did for his bracers and loincloth on the little band that's holding his top knot. And you can't forget his eyebrows as well. And also at some point I put little black dots in his eyeballs for pupils, which I didn't get on the camera. At this point you could stop, call the model done, and move on to the base. However, I decided to go ahead and put that big emblem he has on his chest. Now the sculpt itself doesn't have it, you have to freehand this, but I decided to do this to show how easy it actually is, even if you feel you can't draw, because I certainly can't draw at all. And I'll just show you my approach. It's a little hard to see because I'm using the lightest skin color, that Fenrisian gray, on his chest, so it's a little bit hard, and the cameras really didn't catch it very well. But what I'm doing is I'm placing dots to kind of outline where the prominent corners are of the emblem. So I start with that inner square, and I'll put the dots around each corner there, and then connect those dots and make the square on his inside part, and then I'll just go on the outside parts as well, and I'll put dots on each of the points that create that emblem. And then when I go ahead and connect those dots, I'm just making sure that I'm taking my brush from the angle where if I get additional paint, it's on the inside part where the emblem is. So you don't have to worry about getting this absolute perfect thin or thick line, because you're just going to fill it in later. And hopefully my time lapse of me doing this is kind of filling in the gaps, showing an actual visual example of what I'm trying to explain verbally here. The great thing about this particular emblem on his skin too, if you look at the reference photo, it's not these perfect crisp lines. It's a little jaggedy. It's an ogre. He painted it on himself. He's a little sloppy. So don't feel you have to get this absolute razor sharp perfect lines, because that's really not what the image reference image has either. Most important part is just enjoy the process, have fun with the paint, and see what you come up with. That's really what this is all about. It's just having fun. Okay, back to the base. I went ahead and sprayed red around the rim of the base off camera. I chose red because each faction is separated by their own color on the rims, and since this Ogre Mage is Horde, red is Horde's color. And I'm just going in the recesses of the actual Rumble emblem and putting some black in there to cover up where the red overspray got. Now I'm working on it's gold looking, and you could absolutely use a metallic color gold, which has little metal flakes in it. You could absolutely use that and just put one or two coats of that on this whole emblem and be absolutely fine doing that. I chose not to use actual metallic colors, but rather to use regular colors and do what's called a non-metallic approach. Now, you can take non-metallic approach to the nth degree and make it look amazingly perfect. I only took it to like 2 or 3 steps of that. So I start with a really dull, darker yellow, that ochre, and I make sure I get a nice solid full coverage. It took me maybe 2 or 3 coats to cover up the red. And then I see where my highlights are, where I want the shinier parts of it to be. And I looked at the reference photo, and it was about the 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock, if you're going to look at this from a clock standpoint. And I chose the 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock areas of the circle to bring out more of the shiny parts of the gold. So I stepped it up to this warm yellow, and I'm applying that to those spots, not only on the sides of the circle, but on the face as well. And then for my final color, I just used this golden yellow and put that on even smaller area than I did before to create that final general appearance of it being a gold metallic part. I'm using 2 shades of blue for the little lightning bolt that's in the center of the emblem. The outside part is the darker blue, the inside part of the lightning bolt is the lighter blue. So start with the darker blue first and cover the entire lightning bolt, and then from there go ahead and put the lighter blue on the center part of the lightning bolt. Fortunately, the sculpt here, the center part's raised, which makes it considerably easier to get a nice looking lightning bolt than if you had to freehand it. The top of the base, again, you can do whatever you would like. Your artist's choice here. I chose to just put this slate gray on the top to match the reference photo that I saw on the website. But you could go nuts here. You could go and grab sand, put actual sand on here and glue that down with some like PVA glue. You could do a forest scene with, there's bits and bobs that you can buy that have different foliage elements. You can make this look as cool as you want. However, like I said, I decided just to stick with the reference photo and put this gray on. This took me 2 or 3 coats to get a nice solid gray finish that didn't show any of the red through it. And after removing a little bit of the paint that got into the bottom of his foot and on that peg on the base, I'm ready to go ahead and glue the figure to the base. One important thing with resin, you can't use plastic glues. They won't work. You have to use like a super glue or a crazy glue, some type of adhesive glue. And I just found that super glue is the best. Not necessarily this brand, just super glue in general is the way to go. Just a little bit is all you need. You don't want it oozing out from the bottom of his foot. And with that, he is on his base, and I think he turned out really, really cool. And with that, I'm going to consider this model done and ready to be put on display. I typically paint much larger figures than this, around the 1/8 to 1/6 scale, but it's Warcraft, brand new. I had to jump in and see how these figures actually looked and how they printed, and I'm really, really happy I did. I'd love to hear from you, though, what you thought of this whole idea of Warcraft releasing all these figures to print. And I'd also love to know if you'd like to see me paint more of these on the channel, and if so, like which character would you like to see. And I can also do different styles, such as not using the airbrush at all, just to show what a complete start to finish would look like with just hand brushing as well. In any event, I hope that you found something in this video helpful or entertaining. And if so, if you would be so kind to consider leaving a like or even subscribing if you would like to see future videos. It goes a long way with helping support the channel and allowing me to keep doing what I'm doing. And with that, thank you so much. And if you like this video, hopefully you like the next video coming up as well. Thank you.